Good morning, and what an absolute privilege to be here as we were all discussing a second ago. And we recognize that we're the thing between you and lunch, but we think that we're worth, at least everything to the left of me, is worth listening to. I find it interesting that as you look behind us and we have a scale that ends with community, our panel here really is where we integrate. We integrate the various things. We're trying very hard, as we talked a second ago, not to duplicate what you've already heard, because certainly there is that orange line or thread that links all. But what we'd like to do is take a second, because we're very aware that there are folks outside of this room that we are also attempting to reach, is take a second by each panelist. Tell us a little bit about your organization, because a lot of this is people who are used to talking to each other and have been in the room before with each other. So if you could, please, Rosye, we'd start with you.
Sure. My name is Rosye Cloud. I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and in particular, my organization is part of the Office of Economic Opportunity. Within that organization, there's a special group of folks, my team, who come together to make sure that we look at things related to transition, all the antecedents related to transition, employment opportunities, and economic impact elements. So that takes us into the community level strategic partnerships and opportunities to look at ways that we can leverage earned benefits like the GI Bill, wonderful benefits like vocational rehab, and ensure that they are making the types of impacts in the lives of veterans that help them meet their full potential.
Thank you. Thank you, Colonel. My name is Todd Baxter. I'm the Executive Director of the Veterans Outreach Center in Rochester, New York. One of the oldest nonprofits serving veterans, started by our Vietnam veterans, who we need to give credit to, that started such a great organization. Now we're taking care of our post-9/11 generation. We do four main things well, we believe, and based on this third toolkit that I got to review, we're going to obviously do some introspect on that and make sure we're doing it the correct way. We have a wellness department that has a unique ability to fill in the gap for the VA. In particular, we do art therapy, and we do canine therapy, and we're starting to work with some horses and do that type of therapy. We know that education and employment is a key to getting soldiers back into the civilian world. So we have a large education. We work with the GI Bill. We work with all our local institutions, colleges, and in particular our community college that I'll allude to a little bit later. And we have a vocational training area, which we do over 50 classes a year. The most recent class we're proud of is we developed a welding course based on employers asking for veterans that they wanted to hire that were certified welders. And we recently graduated 8 veterans, including 2 females, certified as welders in New York State. So, and the last thing we do is homeless. We support 2 SSVF grants, supportive services of veteran families, both in the Rochester and Buffalo region, and we also have a homeless shelter where we house 40 veterans. We're long-term housing. It's just not an overnight housing. We keep them for 90 days up to 2 years and give them those complete wraparound services, trying to identify what's causing that homeless population and what we could do to correct it and form new habits.
Thank you, Todd. Kathleen?
My name is Kathleen McLaughlin. I'm the president of the Walmart Foundation, and I'm also the senior vice president of sustainability for Walmart. The foundation is a separate 501c3, but we derive our funding entirely from Walmart. And you can think of us as an extension of Walmart in terms of trying to bring about better social and environmental outcomes. We have 3 big themes that we focus on: sustainability, opportunity, and community. And veterans is a very important priority for us under that umbrella theme of opportunity. The way that we work, we tend to set outcomes that we'd like to see in those arenas, and then we look at the assets we can bring to bear through the foundation and through Walmart as a company, whether it's Walmart associates, locations, logistics know-how, you name it, supply chain, supplier relationships, and so on. And we say, how can we draw on those assets to make a difference to those outcomes? We like to approach things in a very systemic way. So we do fund individual grantees, but we're always looking to have them connect with others and drive change at the system level.
Richard?
Thank you. My name is Richard Perez. I am the president and CEO of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. So we're a kind of a non-traditional not-for-profit. We're a 501c6, which is a membership organization. We're the oldest business organization in San Antonio. We have 2,000 different businesses that together employ about 500,000 people in San Antonio and the surrounding area. And we have, in our 121-year history, been very involved in military affairs in the San Antonio area. San Antonio has the largest joint base in the entire Department of Defense, and so the footprint that the DoD has in San Antonio is very, very large, has a huge economic impact. So consequently, we have a special focus on the military. We have a military affairs committee, which is one of our oldest committees of the chamber. We have 16 different committees that deal with things such as transportation and workforce development, et cetera. But we've got a cadre of very committed individuals that are our volunteers and help us with military issues. And we'll talk a little bit more about all the forms that takes, but that's kind of us in an overview.
Thank you. And again, Colonel Rich Morales, I am fortunate to live in San Antonio, where I see that community in action. It's a very thriving military community. In my capacity last year, I had a chance to see the biggest companies in this country put their money where their mouth is, whether they be Walmart, Bank of America, Blackstone. And frankly, you see the scale here of 5,000 outlets and stores, which they leverage very carefully, Walmart does, to the scale of one very small community, which is in contrast to San Antonio, it's a very large community. And then you got the Veterans Affairs, and Rosye looking at a very specific segment of the Veterans Affairs and their fantastic transformation. It's happening, frankly, before our very eyes, as the Veterans Affairs Department adapts how they do business. So I'd like, if I could, ask each of you this first question, which is, what are those examples, and it's a similar question you've heard, where you see the collaboration to be the strongest, to meet those gaps, and where do you uniquely see it working best? Rosye?
Sure. I mean, I think in the last couple of years, we've seen a significant change in the landscape altogether. I mean, I think we're all here today because we recognize that as the entire space transforms, and quite frankly, so has government transformed. I mean, there's probably been more collaboration within government over the last couple of years than in the last 10 years when it comes to issues related to transition. And some of that started with the entire transformation of how we run a TAP program. Within the VA, I think if we were already kind of in this process move, and then this wonderful thing called Secretary McDonald, right, happened to us, and then he challenged all of our organization to exponentially up our game when it comes to how we serve veterans and how we think about them. So for the VA, that's meant taking a look at how we partner, how we effectively partner in communities on a national level, and look for meaningful ways, evidence-based ways to be able to do that. What that has translated into is using evidence that the government possesses and bringing it together in a more concise way, because frankly, we're your partner in this as well. So we need to be more transparent in sharing data and information. So that led to our first ever economic report, where we took records of about 1 million 9/11 veterans and a lot of other disparate databases and created a narrative of what does the landscape look like. It was our first attempt at showing all of you where we see opportunity space, and to help guide the narrative of what is fact-based when we're talking about transition, employment, education issues, and the types of information that should drive some of our place-based strategies. We have a lot of partners here today. We are currently in the process of about 50 different strategic partnerships that have place-based implications. But I think some of the major examples for us have been with top employers when we look at registered apprenticeships, where the Department of Labor has come in, taken folks like the Blackstone team, translated that into their sub-portfolio companies where they're partnering with education institutions, directly hiring graduates from that, when possible leveraging the GI Bill because of the nature of the registered apprenticeship program and scaling that out. There's a significant level of scale that's happening. Rally Point 6 that we heard about today, another one of our partners from a strategic partnership perspective, they didn't come to the VA, we're going to them and taking our benefits advisors that work TAP and transition and providing those services through Rally Point 6, because we want to learn about how can we improve the way that the VA actually conducts its outreach and engagement. And then you have, fantastic partnerships through our technology and employment platform with LinkedIn and Coursera, where we recognize that LinkedIn has a wonderful opportunity to really leverage employment and skills and training information to transitioning service members. The VA should not be in that space when we have a wonderful partner like LinkedIn who's providing all those services at no cost to the veteran. our job is to make sure we create that scale and that amplification to make it happen. So those are some of the examples over the last year where we have moved the needle, if you will. We have a lot more work to do, but very, very much hopeful that we're able to continue to scale this out.
And Todd, before you share your example of collaboration, are you seeing what Rosye just described at Rochester?
Yeah, and I was
Or is it
going
a
to
slow trickle?
I wouldn't say it's a slow trickle. It's a very important issue. Speaking, I was saying how this important this is to a local nonprofit that doesn't have the ability to conduct these data researches on their own. You know, we talked about the measurables, how difficult it would be for us to sustain those measurables. This institute, IVMF, the VA, we use that data all the time, and we try and gear our future and our strategic plan towards that data. One of the interesting points that we're preparing for at a local nonprofit level is female veterans. And we know there's going to be a lot of female veterans with the downsizing of the military. We know there's issues, in particular, obviously, with sexual trauma. We just don't know at the local level what is going to be our mission to fulfill. So using this data and these researches to our advantage, we look for them, we like them, and we're always looking for new points of information to point the landscape to the future, because you know, we're grassroots. We take care of the veterans at the front door, but we don't have the ability to gather all this data, so the collaboration in this room right here is essential to us. As far as collaboration at the local nonprofit for the Veterans Outreach Center, first of all, there's a lot of competition. People look at it as competition of different veteran service agencies. Rochester, New York is no different. We're surrounded by a lot of agencies that do good work for veterans, but we're also surrounded by an atmosphere, I think, of cooperation and communication. We have an organization, it's not a place, it's more of a philosophy called One Team, One Fight in Rochester. And the idea there is all the veteran-friendly veteran service agencies get together at least once a month and just talk. What's going on in your area, what are you doing, and see if there's any collaboration efforts there. That's just one example of people do that on their own. There's not an us versus them mentality. Another great example that I'll use is the local nonprofit ability to react to an issue. And bringing our partners, for instance, in the VA in this example, we had a veteran released from Monroe County Jail in June. And the veteran checked all the boxes he was supposed to check as he was leaving jail, and the deputy that was releasing him thought there were some issues, and he was a veteran himself. Unfortunately, a week later, that veteran committed suicide, and we weren't able to get our hands around that veteran. After that phone call, within a matter of weeks, we were certified, our wellness department was certified to go into the Monroe County Jail and conduct outreach to all the prisoners that are veterans, and now we're checking the boxes. Each veteran is arrested. Unfortunately, there's something very chaotic going on in their life, but we're able to identify them as soon as they get arrested and get to them before they're released from jail and start our wellness program with them, or at least offer it to them as a resource. The beautiful part about that is the VA's right hand in hand with us. We walk through the door with the Veterans Outreach Center's wellness person and a VA representative walking through the door and offering all those services to that incarcerated veteran. So collaboration is the name of the game in this for us.
Thank you. Kathleen, a very different perspective, please.
Yeah, you know, I was really struck earlier today when Corporal Eisenhower was talking about the need for more horizontal and vertical, I think you said integration, but even collaboration. And what you're just describing, we're starting to see more and more as well. You know, I'd say about 5 years ago, our own strategy, we were trying to learn the veteran space, was much more focused on individual organizations doing great work and trying to help them scale up and get better. And so we were funding great organizations that were doing multi-point work in a number of communities. We did a vocational acceleration program, for example, through IVMF, and a number of sub-grantees, Goodwill, Operation Good Jobs was one of them. That was all about employment and placement and so on. Our own company made a hiring commitment to hire 100,000 veterans, and we're up to 77,000 now. And these are folks who are doing extremely well in great jobs in logistics and assistant store managers and so on. So those were great interventions, but you know, I describe them more as one-off, multi-point. What we're trying to get to now is a recognition that if you're a veteran coming home and you're trying to reintegrate into society, you are in a place, and you're facing this panoply of services, some from the government, some from private sector, some from civil society, and how do you navigate that? The analogy we like to use is, if you look at a roadmap of a city, if you look at a roadmap of Dallas, it looks very complicated. Lots of highways, lots of off-ramps, side roads, and so on, and it's complex. But the complexity that is felt by a person can be boiled down to something much more simple if they have the Google map and it says, well, you're going to go from A to B to C to D. So how do we create that experience? And that's really where we're trying to focus more now. So we had a commitment we made 5 years ago to invest $20 million in the veteran space, which we did, and we delivered on that, and I think it was good individual work. Our new commitment that we just made last year is to re-up and invest another $20 million in the next few years, but much more in these place-based strategies. So we just announced yesterday our first foray into this, which is in North Carolina, in Charlotte. And we're working with folks on the ground there, with IVMF, and with folks from the government, from Governor McCrory's team, Ilaria Pantano, and so on, and then folks from local civil society. Charlotte Bridge Home is here, and others, and then other employers, so Bank of America, Walmart, and so on, to say, how do we create an integrated strategy for Charlotte? So for folks coming here, what are they experiencing? What do they need to know? What's missing in that network of services, and then how do we create that more seamless referral, that Google map for those people, so that they can not only get the great education and employment, but all the other services they need for themselves and their families. And we believe that that will require some adjustments to the services that are offered, not only in the nonprofit sector, all the things that were talked about today in terms of consolidation and upskilling better organizations, more data-driven, better outcomes, and so on, but also from the other sectors. So if we look at what is the government providing at the federal or state or local level, what needs to change there? Maybe we need more education for veterans in terms of transition before separation. We heard some examples about formularies today, so there are no doubt some changes there as well. And then in the private sector, how can we get better as employers at defining the skills we need and helping those folks upskill and have a great career? So we're excited to undertake this. Obviously this isn't the first thing like this around the country, and we've been actively learning from other communities that have been exploring this, but we look forward to taking this one forward.
Kathleen, before we move on to San Antonio, could you share what is, in essence, an internal collaboration? I found it interesting that usually there's a fairly bright separation between what a foundation may do and what the business does. Mm-hmm. And you shared earlier how you leverage those 5,000 very, very unique and locally positioned parts of your business to carry out your mission.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more powerful things about our model, and it's something you're starting to see more and more companies do, which is the recognition that what a company can bring or a corporate foundation can bring to a space isn't just money. I mean, we do write checks, but that's not our biggest power. It's leveraging the assets of the company. So the way we do it, it's a one-way street, right? So as the foundation, we can draw on those skills of Walmart all day long. We don't, however, make grants that help Walmart, right? So that's sort of the line. But there are lots of examples. So disaster relief, we partner with the Red Cross, but we also draw on our associates to assist in times of disaster. We contribute goods and so on. And in fact, we've got a great veterans program. We're partnering with Team Rubicon, who I realize is here as well, on creating more of a disaster corps for veterans, even amongst our own Walmart associates, so that they can provide more assistance. Or our hunger program, we're contributing food out of our stores. So we give about $1 billion a year in kind in food to Feeding America. We also provide refrigerated trucks to create a cold chain. We also provide logistics expertise around DC optimization and so on. And that's in addition to our grants. So veterans is no different. We're trying to take a whole system approach and say, we've got people, we have jobs, we have over 1 million employees in this country, so can we create jobs for folks? But we're also part of local communities, so how can we bring that to bear, as well as our convening power and our money, to try to create this more whole system, local, community-based approach?
Non-community, or hometown,
Yes.
San Antonio. So A, example of the collaboration, and B, really, as you've heard all these different things come together, what do you see working and potentially not?
Sure. Well, as a Chamber of Commerce, all that we do all day long is collaborate. We have a series of volunteers, over 1,000 volunteers that come to our offices on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and we tackle problems and concerns and issues. And as I talked a little bit earlier about the military space in particular, so the Military Affairs Committee, through their work, and many of them, by the way, are veterans. They've transitioned out and now are working in the private sector. So they realized that one of the impediments to being able to understand what was going on the active duty military base was not having contact with the senior enlisted NCOs. You know, they are the guys on the ground and gals on the ground that are getting things done. And how could we begin to talk with them on a monthly basis to understand what are the issues that we could do to help them as they're training young people in the military? And so we convened this senior enlisted advisory council that meets on a monthly basis. There's probably 30 or so senior NCOs, and then about another 25 or 30 business people that come together. There's an agenda, very specific agenda, to what are the things that we can do to help as young people are coming off the base and on the base, making sure that they're keeping busy and out of trouble and those kinds of things, but also transportation issues, the collaboration that we need so that people can get in and off the base well. So that's one example. And Todd, you talked about women military leaders. So we've created a women-to-women, leader-to-leader coalition of substantial business women in San Antonio that bring together those ladies that are in office or in uniform now to begin to develop their network. They have a very strong network within the DOD and on the base, but outside of the fence, it's a little bit different story. And so to be able to bring them in and befriend them and help them as they transition out into the workforce. And so that has been working very, very well and continues to grow on a monthly basis, and they're meeting on a monthly basis. We also have a military commanders liaison program. So general officers and officers, we pair them up with a business person. So as they transition into San Antonio, they have a friend, and we tell them about the local grocery store and the parks and things to do on the evenings, churches, schools. And that has been a very effective program in strengthening the tie between the business community and the active duty military. And you solve problems through friendships and through collaborations. And so that is a very, very important one. But I think the cherry on top, if you will, is a program we started about 2 years ago that's called the Military and Veterans Community Council. And that we did with the help of our San Antonio Area Foundation and the United Way. We all represent a variety of different groups, and there's a lot of those groups that serve veterans in San Antonio. And I mean, there's a lot of them. And they all do good things, but it is, as you've just described, Kathleen, it's complex. The road network, it's complex. So bringing them all together to have one convening place so we can understand what you're doing, and how can we work together in that collaboration so that there could be a one-stop, so that as someone is transitioning out of the military or is in the military is having issues that they need help with, it can run the gamut of housing or medical care or who knows what, but it's bringing all of those parties together so that we can understand what we're doing and then be able to provide that in a much more efficient way to our clients, which are the military.
I appreciate it, Richard. And that's a sort of additional level of depth that we're looking for. Obviously, across this great country, we have Joint Lewis up at Fort Lewis, and we have communities that are, while they may be titled Military City USA, they're certainly doing those great things. So what are those things that they might not yet be doing? And again, as this is a conversation, we want to hear what's working out there. So we have a question that is directed to the VA that asked, so what specifically could our nation's nonprofits be doing to better work with VA? How do they draw your attention, and where do you decide where to invest your resources with regard to nonprofits?
I think that's a great question. So we spend, on any given week, I would say 10, 15 organizations come through our office, primarily talking to us about the potential of strategic partnerships or what those opportunities are. And I think a very candid conversation and thread that's kind of been consistent across the way is the majority of them who are taking an hour and a half to create that value proposition spend the majority of their time convincing me why veterans are important, right? And I guarantee you, I don't need convincing on that. I'm with you. I mean, we are 100% game on when it comes to making sure that veterans get the best and that we do right by them. And so my questions are very consistent. And in fact, we are now providing those questions ahead of time, right? It's my business school kind of training coming to place. And I want to know the questions of, what is your objective? Right? What is your core objective? Where do you see your competitive advantage in the space? How have you used evidence to create either the burning platform of why this is the gap you're choosing to close? How have you built strategies around that to ensure that you're going to create an impact, there's efficacy? And 9 times out of 10, that conversation becomes a circular conversation where folks are telling me about the number of people touched. And we talk a lot about activities, and I personally believe, and I understand we want to mature beyond just activity-based counting, got it. But the truth is, for most of the organizations that are in the space, they don't have scale. So the activity counting is part of what they're trying to get through, is trying to understand how they create that pipeline or the access points to try and create some level of scale so they have more to talk about. So the majority of the conversations, frankly, become then the narrative story of one, right? That very compelling narrative story of one. And from the VA's perspective, we obviously care about that narrative story of one, but I want to know scale. I want to know the evidence around it. I want to know, basically, from a partnership perspective, how we are being as equal partners coming together to create this amazing opportunity to really to support our veterans, their families. And we also understand that there's a spectrum of need, right? There are different demographic needs. And so if you're talking to me about a 9/11 veteran, but you don't understand what the demographic of that 9/11 veteran looks like, that they're not all 24, right? That many of them are married, that spouses have a significant role because when they transition, they're entering the American reality of a dual income household, and they're having to now compete, having had much time away from the employment sector themselves. So that lack of, that taking it one step beyond cultural competency of understanding the military, the veteran experience, but upping the game to actually understand not the actual environment of where we create efficacy is very important. And so as part of the VA matures this process, those are some of the conversations we want to have. And when we enter into public-private partnerships, and a lot of the folks in this room who have entered in them, you'll see measures of success, because I do think the government has a role to play here as well when we partner to also talk about what types of outcome measures, what types of information we want to share both ways. We think that that's extremely important.
So Kathleen, if I could jump to you, really the same question while it was posed to VA, just from a different perspective. How do you shape that impact? What are the decisions that you make as you decide where to allocate your resources?
So the way we would look at it now is a little bit different than a few years ago. So when we first started, as I mentioned, we were looking at individual institutions and what was the impact they were having. So similar to what you were saying, what's their theory of change? How do they, what's their value proposition? What are the metrics that they're using to show success along those lines, and then supporting those organizations. Earlier, there was a great conversation about the need to build capacity as well as fund good programs, and we wholeheartedly agree. So a lot of our decision-making is in the grant, how much would we like to direct towards strengthening the capacity of that organization so they can collect the relevant data, so they can hire the right people, build the right systems, and so on, and then how much of the funding goes toward direct program delivery. So that's quite conscious. Now, as we're trying to take more of a systemic approach, we are still looking at the individual grantees from that perspective, but we're also looking at the system as a whole and saying, okay, how do we bring together our resources and convene others who also have resources so that together what we're funding has a few key elements. So one is integrated strategy or vision of, at that community level, what are the services that are there, what are the services that are missing, and how do we knit them together in a more seamless way? And again, that could be public sector, private sector, or civil society. Two, funding the data backbone that would sit beneath that would allow us to start collecting data on outcomes and see how effective the system is at delivering those, whether it's good employment and longevity in those roles or health outcomes or what have you. And we need to be able to collect those at the individual institutional level, but also collectively as a system. Third, in trying to take this approach, what's the mechanism that's going to provide that concierge functionality? We heard earlier from Dave Smith, and he's a great concierge sitting in Norway at his computer, right, replying to people who are emailing him saying, I need some help. Well, what's that going to look like in a place like Charlotte? Is it one organization? You described some great examples of that. Or are there multiple points of entry? Do we need to recognize that, hey, guys and gals may come to us from many different entry points, so how do we catch them and find them and provide that concierge door, the no wrong door kind of service? What's that going to look like? And I'm not sure we've cracked that as a collective here. So that's part of the problem solving and something we were interested in funding. And then, again, capacity building. So if we say, yeah, there's 1,000 organizations, what are the handful that we're going to bet on, that we're going to say, you know what, these are the ones, let's try to scale these and build them up. And those are going to be the folks that are the lead in those different verticals that are providing a range of services. So that's how we're thinking about it now.
Great. And just to add to the point of certainly one size doesn't fit all. So for my narrow Army soda straw now, with a brigade rate across 8 states, I happen to be in our ROTC Cadet Command. We've got problems at a university that could be an Uber university, Arizona State University with their 75,000 students, if I say small. So given that we have the opportunity here to hear from a large community and a much smaller community, what isn't yet working, one, or two, maybe posed a different way, what's next for you? So we've talked about all the great things you're doing now. What haven't you got to and why, and what are you doing next? And either of you can answer that in whatever order you like.
Well, one of the things that through this community council that we've been convening is we've realized now that, you know, and then one of the earlier panels talked about TAP, Transition Assistance Program. And so that is set up, of course, to be able to get folks ready to transition out of the military. And it's got certain rules on who can go and be involved in helping with that process. Mm-hmm. And rightfully so. You don't want to have undue influence from businesses, for example. You don't want to cross a line. But I think one of the things that we've seen is that we're missing relevant, real-time information from businesses that are on the ground every single day providing goods and services that is not being communicated real-time to those folks transitioning out. And to be able to, so one of the tasks that we're working on is figuring out how can we have a second day to the Transition Assistance Program to be able to provide some businesses to go and talk to them about what are the relevant skills and how do you put those relevant skills down on paper so that you're communicating directly to employers. My own story, I'm in the middle of hiring right now for an executive vice president. And given the wealth of military folks that we have in our community, a lot of them, or several of them apply, general officers and the like. And translating what they do to what I need is a challenge. And these are senior military folks. So that, I think, we can work on, I think, collaboratively, and not just in San Antonio, but this is something that affects the entire country. And being able to help with that, I think, would be a key issue to improve the whole process of transitioning out of the military.
Thank you. And Todd, again, where are we still not hitting the mark?
Well, one of the opportunities that we realized in Rochester, a study conducted by Monroe Community College in Rochester identified a skills gap. And the skills gap was rather profound, that even the local community colleges and the BOCES and schools that do middle skills training will never be able to produce enough folks with the skills to fill the jobs that are just in the Rochester area. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously an awesome opportunity for veterans and veterans transitioning. So we're trying to go to the local institutions right now. We're up at Fort Drum, and we're trying to recruit the veterans, soon-to-be veterans, as they're getting ready to transition out. And the command at Fort Drum's been nothing but open arms to us. And we're going up there with our civil service folks from the city of Rochester, Monroe County, to offer civil service exams right on Fort Drum, to entice folks to come back to the Rochester area. We're going up there with our local colleges and talking about the GI Bill and talking about the benefits of coming to Rochester, New York for our colleges. And we're going up, obviously, from a personal point, from the Veterans Outreach Center, saying when you do come to Rochester, make sure you stop at one of your local Veterans Service agencies and get the assistance transitioning back into the civilian life that you need. And that's kind of personal because we want those veterans back in the Rochester area. It's not the best place to go. It was -12 when I left yesterday, so we got to do some enticement to get them back. Or get them to come there. But the idea is give them hope when they're leaving the military. Here's a clear structure, here's a clear path. Taking advantage of your education, taking advantage of the skills gap that we have in Rochester, and taking advantage of all the nonprofits that are trying to help veterans transition. It's something we really got to work harder on, and we're just starting at Fort Drum. We're looking to expand that, obviously, and go much deeper into the military.
Thank you. Rosye, a question for you. So what do you say to the veteran that isn't in the process of transitioning and perhaps will avail themselves of the improved transition programs we have, but is now transitioned, is out not anywhere near Fort Drum, San Antonio, and is staring at a computer screen as the question just came in, and there's a dizzying array of information? Where do you point them?
Right. Well, I mean, I think number one, that's at the core of why we want to make sure at a local community level we have the federal government partnering with service organizations and NGOs, because there should be a sensible non-Easter egg hunt-like process for a veteran, right, when they are in veteran status. And most of our veterans of the 9/11 generation did not benefit from the improved transition assistance program, right? So you have a huge number of individuals and families that need to connect. And so number one is making sure that we identify those major hubs and communities, those locations where we know collaboration is key, there's scale, there's opportunity, there's jobs on their table, there's GI Bill benefits that have not been used. There's a whole bunch of opportunity to really take advantage of. And so we have been working over the course of the last 6 to 8 months to kind of gather the data to really inform where we see these opportunities across the country to kind of make that happen. Second, we did, through the Veterans Employment Center, create an online platform. Very cleanly, it was a government consolidation effort to create a no-cost. Our competitive advantage was that we could validate folks that were actually using the site were in fact veterans, so it created some level of validation for employers wanting to be able to go to one location, not 50 locations, and to be able to, when we partner strategically, have a platform where you can say, all right, if you are LinkedIn and you're providing a free premium job seeker account to a veteran who is seeking employment for 1 year, there is a mechanism to be able to leverage that and bring scale to it, because that tool is taught not only in all of our transition assistance program sessions, but it's also taught when we go out into the community, such as what we talked about, what we're doing with Rally Point 6 and what we're doing with some of our other partnerships with service organizations, where our benefits advisors are training the TAP piece out in the community from a benefits perspective and a VA perspective to get that information out. So we wanted to create that technology one stop, if you will, recognizing that there's a lot of other types of support services that will go around it, right? It is not going to be the silver bullet. It is just one step. But we wanted to create the infrastructure so that when you talk about upskilling, when you talk about free credentials, our partnership with Coursera, one free credential and in-demand jobs online for any veteran, we want to be able to scale that out. So when you come chat with us, I mean, those are, and a veteran wants to, find out where, we want to be able to point to a unified one location where they're able to navigate those pieces. And frankly, I think the taxpayers should demand that. I think we understand that is very important, but as the customer, the veteran, it needs to be fast and easy when they engage with you all from a nonprofit perspective, service organization, but also with government. So that's our effort to try and make that happen.
So Todd, you mentioned a skills development program. Can you either expand a little more on that, or perhaps discuss someone who hasn't been represented yet, although Mike Haney is here, is what are colleges, universities, what are we doing to better educate our transitioning veterans so they have better opportunities?
Yeah, well, what we find out is most veterans will come off, and for instance, an infantryman probably wants to be a firefighter or a police officer. We know that walking through the door, and the jobs just aren't there in the civil service world anymore, in particular in upstate New York. So we spend a lot of time with the transitioning veteran to identify other things they may be interested in doing. We have a veteran that walked through the door. He was unemployed, and he wanted to be a police officer in the city of Rochester, and obviously the jobs weren't there. He's now finishing up his MBA and working at Harris Communication, building our communication devices that every veteran here is very familiar with, right there in Rochester, New York, and is one of our biggest advocates as we go out and try and sell our program to other veterans to entice them to come through our doors. So we need to start opening up our eyes and going beyond the normal, and that's those middle skill jobs. A lot of folks want to go to the four-year institutions, get a degree that may not produce any fruit at the end of it, when we have a whole lot of great careers out there for veterans. The problem is the veterans don't realize those are careers and career opportunities you can raise a family on and build a great life. Doing something totally different you did in the military. And obviously we all do it, that helps veterans. We try and translate to the employers, the local employers, by working with their HR departments, and we meet with them all. What skills are you looking for? And then we try and translate what an artillery person did in the military and how that's conducive to a culinary arts program at Wegmans. And when you're talking small team leadership, you're talking about diversity, you're talking about problem solving skills and things like that. That's what every employer wants. So we spend a lot of time convincing the soldier, sailor, marine, and airman also that they got skills that may be translated some other way besides the normal jobs that most veterans are looking for when they come out.
Thank you. Richard, I know your capacity in the chamber, you're focused elsewhere. But my sense is small private university, St. Mary's University, offers free room and board scholarships, for instance, to they match any ROTC scholarship, at least on that campus. What do you see the question being for veterans as they transition to the education space in San Antonio?
Well, we're very fortunate. We've got several colleges and universities in San Antonio, and they all have specialized programs for veterans. And in fact, Texas A&M San Antonio has built a new campus on the south side of town, and they just built a new Patriots Casa, which is a large building, multi-floor building, that is solely to help veterans as they're transitioning into their educational life. And it provides them, there's a counseling aspect, that is counseling beyond school counseling, but if you're having issues with the post-traumatic stress that we talked about earlier, providing them with tutoring, because being on a college campus is different from being on a military base. And so this place is a safe place so that veterans can come and really experience the university setting, but at their pace. And so I think it's a very innovative way to focus efforts on veterans. But our University of Texas San Antonio also has a very robust capability for veterans. And then the other universities that we have as well, Our Lady of the Lake, we have University of the Incarnate Word, all very specialized programs to help veterans through that transition into the education space. So it's really exciting. And one of the other things that we've done too is we created a cyber boot camp. So San Antonio has a very, very robust cyber capability. The 24th Air Force is the Air Force's cyber security component, and they have a big presence there. The NSA is there too. And so there are a lot of military members that work in that space, and as they transition out, many of them have products and ideas that they want to create and start businesses. So we created this cyber boot camp that pairs up those individuals that are transitioning out to give them help with their ideas and to ripen them so that they can create a business and turn it into something that will be sustaining for them. And it's been very successful. We've had, I think, 6 businesses now that have been generated through that process that are hiring people and are viable and making money. And it's a very innovative way, but that all came through that collaborative process that we've had with folks that were in the military, saw the opportunity as people were transitioning out, and filled the gap, and it's been very successful.
Thank you. We have a question about performance measurement and performance management systems. So we've talked about sort of certainly what organizations out there could do. The question is really, what are you doing internally, and how do you know you're winning in this space? So I'll just start with you, Rosye, because you're closest. And
Sure. So I'm a big fan of data. I mean, you know, I've talked about this at length, and that part of our driver for our economic opportunity report was really what do we know? How do we really validate it? And the majority of the conversations that we tend to engage in oftentimes are what we think are gut instincts or hunches, right? And so part of what we've been looking at is as we partner with some of our transitioning service members, we have a great partnership with the Army for those that are caught in the rapid drawdown, where we have been working with the Army to not only provide intensive services alongside our partner Department of Labor, but looking at when those job matches happen, is there pay parity, right? The next step beyond did a job happen is there pay parity? Is there retention, right? What are the opportunities here for those individuals who would be least likely to use the GI Bill? We are looking at strategies and partnerships on how do we focus on upskilling? Where are we tracking persistence and graduation rates? Our partners within the VA that lead the GI Bill efforts, you know, have done a lot of really great work, but when we did the post-mortem of, let's look at what do we know of that 9/11 veteran, and quite candidly, many of them who are not using their GI Bill benefit. And so now you have this opportunity, if you will, to talk about how do we talk about the flexibilities and create opportunity space for those veterans who may not necessarily be looking for a 2 or 4 year institution, who are maybe more kinetic, who may be looking at a different type of career change, who are in a local economy that is desperate for their talents in different types of venues, and how can we now look at registered apprenticeships, on-the-job training opportunities? How do we partner and make those things happen? So the data creates opportunity space, I think, not only for partnership, but also to kind of grade ourselves and where we can do better. I look at gaps as opportunities, right? And I think a lot of times in government, we're very hesitant to really share information because we're afraid that that failing grade is actually the only point in time that will be remembered. I look at those opportunities to then create strategies, partnerships, to then close the gap, because that's what veterans deserve from us. They deserve for us to be candid about where we see these gaps, where we see the opportunity space, where government, frankly, won't do it alone, can't do it alone, needs to partner and move it forward. And one of the most key takeaways, that we talk about in transition is, the unemployment space. Why? And when one of the very first findings of the economic report really hit home for me, which said, in that point in time when we ran the report data, 1 out of 2 service members goes into a period of unemployment upon transition. If that isn't a burning platform why we've got to get it right, then I don't know what is, because when 50% of folks are going through that disruption, and oftentimes, the good news here is that, again, they take charge, they're in the driver's seat, they connect to employment, but then that follow-on question for us needs to be, what type of employment, what type of impact does that create on their mobility? How do we actually ensure that they're making that right decision as soon as possible about location, geography, career, GI Bill, to make sure that we get them on that right trajectory that they are so eager to get into? So how do we make sure that information is available to them to keep them in the driver's seat? So again, not wanting to overmanage it, but at the same time ensuring that we're all factually talking about what's the opportunity space, where can we do better, and then from a VA perspective, where do partnerships then naturally pop up as being essential?
Todd, same question. If you're out there and you're watching this and you're in a smaller community that might better see themselves trying to do what you're doing, how do you measure your success?
Well, one of the things we don't do very well is measure success, and we have 1,000 veterans walk through the door, and that was the capacity of the organization, basically. We were reaching capacity there, and we didn't do a good job of it, and that's why these studies, this Bush Institute and the IVMF study, gives us that toolkit we're looking for, the toolkit to identify what we should be measuring and how we measure it, and that it's not overbearing, that someone's creating a mechanism for us to use. I could tell you how many people come through our vocational training area, how many classes we give. I can tell you how many veterans get certified in different areas. I can tell you that 78% of the veterans that walk through our doors are placed in employment if they're seeking employment. And I can tell you an approximate dollar value, give or take a few cents, of that first job. What I can't tell you is how long they sustain that job. Did we do a good job with our HR departments that we place these veterans in by being an assistant to their HR department, by being job coaches as the veterans went through? So measurement is something that we need to do, in particular small nonprofits, because we pretty much measured ourselves, like a lot of the panelists discussed. 1,000 veterans through the door is a mark of success, but it's obviously not the real mark that we're looking for. We need some fruit at the end of it and be able to measure that fruit. So first of all, I think the folks that put this study together, and I've been picking brains since I've been here for 2 days of how you measure these things and what's a better way to do business, because we are limited. We're limited by capacity, limited by man hours, and we're limited by resources. So how do we get our biggest bang for our buck for the veteran walking through the door?
Thank you. Kathleen, you've mentioned some of the adjustments that you've made along the journey. Can you share a little more about your measurement system and how you measure success?
Yeah, I'd say this is an area we haven't figured out. So I think it's easier to measure outcomes in some verticals than others, right? So employment, we are able to track retention and wage deltas and so on. But other verticals are a lot tougher. I think about some of the issues we discussed earlier today. You can see if a veteran has employment. You can see if the obvious medical issues have been taken care of. But how do you know if a veteran is thriving emotionally? How will we measure that? So that's one challenge. And then second is bringing together metrics from different verticals about an individual person. So being able to look at that holistic picture for veterans. I don't know what the answer is going to be. That's one of the things we'd like to do some problem solving on in Charlotte and other places. So,
great. And same, Richard. So I'm Norfolk, Virginia, or I'm Camp Pendleton. How do you measure yourself?
Well, I think probably the best way that I could say we measure ourselves is by the fact that we have such a robust cadre of volunteers that come to us and get involved in the chamber every year. Again, over 1,000 folks that are they're business people. They're doing other things. They have full-time jobs, but they come on a monthly basis and spend upwards of an hour and a half, 2 hours working on issues that affect veterans in the community. And so that gets more robust every year. So I think that's a good measuring stick. I think the other measuring stick is the fact that San Antonio, Texas, Military City USA, as you referred to earlier, is the second highest place for people to retire out of the military, second only to the National Capital Region. That tells you that, my job is to do a larger vision on what the community is and make the community robust. So if we're getting folks that are transitioning out of the military and setting roots in San Antonio, that tells me that we're doing something right. And then we also turn around and we provide this thing that we call Celebrate America's Military. It's a 2-week-long celebration of the military, thanking the military for their presence and all that they do and the sacrifices that they make. So we have speakers and dinners and lunches and breakfasts, all focused on thanking military members. And so those are growing every single year. So those are not quite, metrics that are easy to measure. But I think in my case, I think it points to the fact that we're doing something right.
Great. There's a question here that asks, listen, we've heard, from the VA, their personal knowledge of Accenture, this study, that study. Are any of them talking to each other? So to the person that asked that question, the answer is yes. We're doing it in forums like this. Could we be doing it better? And I liked your answer at Walmart. Of course we could be doing it better. So as we get ready to wrap up, if we could, just from each panelist, so one thing that you think the people in this room or beyond this room could be doing to help you better at your mission to help them. So I don't know if that question makes sense, but the idea is someone's out there listening says, so what do I do to help the VA? What do I do to help, Walmart probably doesn't need help, but what is it that they need?
Well, I think number one is, we need to find ways to partner with you, right? The number one opportunity I would say for 2015 is a lot of this information we talked about pulling together, we want to get it into the hands of the communities. We want to partner with folks geographically in regions and locations and actually sit down, policy academy style, if you will, starting to share that information and coming up with the other questions that we have not answered so that we can work those collectively and share that on a more national level. And so, I don't believe these good ideas come out of DC, right? These are conversations that have to happen with all the right stakeholders involved, and they need to translate into action at that local community. So that's an opportunity.
Todd, at the local level, other than just walking in, what is it that people can do?
Yeah, we have a great opportunity in Monroe County. We collaborate well. I always say when I go out and talk to people is we need help with outreach. We're the Veterans Outreach Center. There's 22 a day committing suicide. The fact is that none that have come through our homeless shelter, none that have come through the VOC that we know of have committed suicide. And that's not because we do anything special, it's because we're here for the veterans. If we can get these guys and gals through the door that ask for help. So I ask the community all the time to help us with outreach. Take the stigma away from it, that you're reaching out. Take the opportunity. You got relatives, friends, neighbors, family members that are veterans. They should be pointed towards a local veteran service agency or the VA. And let's get these guys and gals transitioned back into society the right way.
Thank you. And Walmart, we do want to hear from you.
Sorry?
What could people be doing to help you do
I think that's a very practical suggestion you just made, and for the average person, to me, that's it. We all know a veteran. We all know 10 veterans, wherever we are in this country. So being on the lookout and welcoming people and helping them find those points of connection is something that we can all do as citizens. That would be number one. I'd say for organizations and institutions who might be asking that question, it's more, we like to think about what's the strategy for things that need to change, and then what's your role in it as an institution. Well, we've got studies now. We've got really good facts, thanks to the Bush Institute and others who've put these things together. Study that and let's get aligned on what needs to change, and then reflect on what is the role that your institution can play in that, and how do you now wire the connections to the other ones to collaborate in a way that's going to make 1 + 1 = 3.
I would close by just saying people need to get involved. We all know, as you've said, there are issues, there are people that need help. But if you don't raise your hand and get involved, then that is an opportunity that's wasted. And our country is, as you've heard, is a giving country, but not just dollars, people time, people place, and getting involved. And I think that is the key to our continued success.
What a great way to close, and we are closing. This idea of coming together, of giving of your very rich talents. I look out at this room and fortunate to have met so many of you and know the passion that you bring. I want to thank, on behalf of all the panelists, and we get to be last, so we'll just say it again. really this amazing team here at the Bush Institute. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you, panelists.
Thank you.